Oh, hi, Steve. Are you ready for more, Steve? What video have you come up with this time, Steve? Are you gonna debate me, Steve? Are you gonna block me, Steve? Are you ready for
Round 2. Fight!
Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about the wage gap.
Alright, Steve. Tell us what you've noticed this time.
It exists in nearly every line of work. The wage gap between men and women is real.
Actually, it's not real. It's not a wage gap. It's an earnings gap. But we'll get into that in a minute. We'll get into that. Don't worry, Steve.
It's a thing that exists.
Yeah, you're right. And back in the medieval era, Europeans thought that there were evil, disgusting, horrible creatures in Asia because only a few people had actually visited the area. And for those who did visit, reported no such things. But the vast majority of people who claimed to have visited Asia, when in fact they never did, claimed that there were these horrible monsters. But, you know, apparently the patriarchy and the wage gap exists because feminism is for the oppressed, and we have to believe the oppressed because listen and believe.
And though its size varies from job to job, it's present in all but a relative few occupations. More than that, it exists in male-dominated, female-dominated, and gender-balanced fields. In business, in education, in computers, in sales, in healthcare, in the arts, in virtually any line of work you can think of.
It's a simple explanation, Steve. It's not hard. Women work less hours than men. They tend to work in poorer paying work than men. They have children, they take more days off, more weeks off. This is why it's an earnings gap and not a pay gap, and which is why this so-called wage gap is in all these areas that you speak of. It's very, very easy to understand and grasp. But you're a social justice warrior. Maths has never been your strong point. Hell, I'm crap at maths and I'm better than you at maths. Damn, I'm beginning to sound like Ryan Wiley.
Women are paid less than men.
No, Steve. No, they are not. If they were, we'd be seeing a lot of women being hired by employers because they get paid less. That's how capitalism works. Employers prefer to go for the immigrants who will work harder and more longer hours for less pay than other people from their own country who want to work for more pay and less hours. We'd be seeing a lot of discrimination hearings going on if women were paid less than men. But they're not. They earn less than men because of what I just said. Stop lying, Steve.
The most commonly cited statistic here in the US is that women make 78% as much as men in terms of annual median earnings. But,
Steve, that doesn't prove your wage gap theory. That just proves the earnings gap theory. But do go on. But
the wage gap is not as simple as that.
Enlighten us, Steve.
It's worse for older women. The wage gap is actually quite a bit smaller for young women. Women under the age of 35 earn about 90% of what men earn, which still isn't ideal, but is a lot better than 78%.
Actually, Steve, there is evidence to suggest that women under 35 are earning more than men when they're single and working the exact same hours as men, especially when they're bosses. In several British publications, including The Guardian and the Daily Mail, we see that women earn 81p more when they're 31, and as you are correct, the older women do earn less, but this is mainly because of what I've mentioned before. People are starting families later in life than they used to back in the day, when as far back as 50 to 60 years ago, women were having families in their late teens to the entirety of their 20s, not necessarily their 30s. By the time they were 30, they were more likely to have a third or fourth child, but that's not the case anymore because now people want careers. They want to earn a lot of money and then settle down and have a family to be more secure and then get back into work. And this explains the age gap in terms of pay. These women have had families, or they have had more breaks than men, and thus they earn less. Again, I've pretty much already answered your question, but this is all down to some patriarchal conspiracy, Steve.
But the older women get, the more that wage gap grows.
Because, as I mentioned, Steve, people are having families later in life, hence why the wage gap is growing a lot longer in life. When originally it would have been there in their teens and 20s, now it's in their late 30s to 60s. It's that obvious, Steve.
The wage gap also grows the more educated women become. Even though there are now more women than men enrolling in college, a woman with a bachelor's degree can expect to earn just 71% of what a man with a bachelor's degree earns. And women with graduate degrees earn 69% of what men with graduate degrees earn.
Again, this is very easily explained. Women choose to take degrees in subjects like sociology, psychology, social sciences, women's studies, general studies, etc., etc., the social sciences, that the jobs that lead on from those degrees simply do not pay as well as the degrees that mostly men go into, such as computing, engineering, the sciences, basically the STEM fields, which includes maths as well. That is why these women are not earning as much as their male counterparts. Now, the women who do the degrees in STEM fields earn as much as the men until they either take, longer breaks, work less hours, or have children, as I've mentioned before. But they will earn more if they work the exact same amount of time and have no children, and basically what I said before. But what are we going to do? Are we going to force these women to work longer hours in order to see the wage gap disappear, Steve? What's it going to be?
That one surprised me when I read it for the first time.
Really, Steve? It's not very surprising. The people with the degrees that lead to the higher paying jobs get higher wages. And especially those who work for more hours get more pay with less breaks. It's logical.
But not all the data about the wage gap is so unexpected. Some of it seems depressingly familiar.
Patriarchal conspiracy, Steve?
It's worse for women of color.
Oh no, not another section about race. I've already had to talk about it twice this week. Now I've got to talk about it again. Okay, Steve, hit me.
The disparities between the earnings of women of color and white men are simultaneously shocking and the sorts of things to which many of us have grown dismally accustomed.
That is a stupid comparison, Steve. Because not only is there certain systemic and outside factors that are the reasons why minorities earn less than other people in America, such as white people, despite the fact that Asian Americans earn as much, if not more, than white people. But let's just stick with black women and white men. You're comparing apples and oranges here. Surely you would prefer to compare black women to black men. Black men earn more than black women. Indeed, up until very recent history, black men earned more than white women. It's only until very recently, the last couple of decades or so, or maybe only the last 10 years, or maybe a bit longer, I don't know, white women have been earning a lot more than black men. But, you're not going to compare the fact that black men do earn more than black women. You're just going to compare black women with white men, which is a terrible comparison to make for your argument. But do carry on, Steve.
Black women earn 64% of what white men earn. Hispanic women have it even worse. They earn just 54% of what white men earn.
You know what, Steve? I agree. We need more minorities to get into university so that these people can earn as much as their white counterparts. I totally agree with that. We need to somehow find a way to get social mobility up and running again and to try and get them to earn as much. But the fact of the matter is, America, because this is the American point of view of the wage gap, which, you might appear to mention, hopefully. But never mind. Let's continue with this. We need to sort out the systemic problems that ethnic minorities, like blacks and Latinos, face in society. Only then will we see the wage gap rapidly decrease. Because unlike in white women's favour, where they have this social mobility and they are more likely to be born into a more stable and supporting society or family structure, Black and Latino women aren't as such, and that's because of generations of things that we all know. Like, you know, it started off with slavery and then Jim Crow, etc., etc. It's because of the historic discrimination, which, as we've seen, is slowly improving, but we've still got a long way to go. I agree. And until we deal with these problems and be able to get more of these people into university, we can then see that their earnings, because thank God you said earnings and not wages, will increase tenfold. They will increase a hell of a lot.
And those statistics, and all of the statistics I've referred to so far in this video, refer to the wage gap as it exists in the United States, by the way. But the wage gap is no respecter of political boundaries.
Sargon was right.
It exists worldwide. When the World Economic Forum released its report last year on the global gender gap, it found just one country, Denmark, where women earn more than men on average. It found no country where women earn the same as men for doing the same job.
Oh wait, hang on a sec. Isn't that a bad thing, Steve? Isn't that gender discrimination, Steve? Women earning more than men? Isn't that sexism, Steve? Oh wait, but because it's happening to men in Europe, in Denmark, it's okay. That's not discrimination, because men can't be the victims of sexism.
The US finished in the middle of the pack, 65th out of 142 countries.
Steve, through this little conversation we've had that you can't actually hear me, but nonetheless I'm going to have this conversation anyway, did you actually sit down when you were doing this video and you were doing your research and you're showing your sources? You know, you took one of them out because it was actually contradicting what you were saying. We caught you. The internet doesn't lie. The internet doesn't forget. Did you not think that maybe the amount of time a woman takes on leave and on breaks, which is more than men, is a reason why they don't earn as much as men, right? Did you ever think, yeah, that's probably a reason why? Or did you just automatically assume patriarchy? Just wondering. I mean, it is obvious and logical why there is an earnings gap. But never mind.
Among the countries that finished ahead of us were Canada, the UK, and Burundi, which actually had the smallest wage gap.
Burundi? Really? I'm going to make a wild stab at the dark and say maybe it's because they have a very small population and maybe aren't as industrialised or as advanced as all the other Western countries. Or maybe they just have more of a different culture when it comes to work, and maybe men take as many breaks as women. Who knows? But I don't think this list is really indicative of the earnings gap in comparison to other countries. The fact that America comes 65th really does baffle me.
Among the countries that finished behind us in the survey were China, Italy, and Israel, and those latter two have women earning less than 50% of what men earn.
But it's all the patriarchal conspiracy, eh, Steve? Jesus Christ, no wonder we don't invite you to these meetings anymore, because you keep telling everyone our secrets, you horrible shill.
You've probably noticed by this point that this is one of the videos in this series where I'm all serious and earnest.
Oh really, Steve? I never would have guessed.
And I know that a lot of you prefer the funny ones, and hell, I like the funny ones better too, to be honest, but...
Oh, what's up, Steve? Is your heart not in this one? Is this a bit of a chore for your Patreon subscribers? Why do you prefer the funnier ones? I mean, what's so funny about calling all MRAs misogynist bastards with no evidence?
I could only think of one joke regarding the wage gap, and it's not very funny either.
So basically they're on par with your other funny videos, not funny at all. Okay.
Even so, it is the biggest joke that I know of about the wage gap. It's the fact that its existence is still denied by some.
Oh, they're only just worldwide economists and business people who know their shit. Hell, even feminists like Christina Hoff Sommers have debunked the wage gap. But don't mind these experts, because they don't know their shit. Us feminists, us radfems, we protectors of the oppressed know everything that needs to be known and that the wage gap exists.
The wage gap is a fact.
I have to talk about facts.
I don't know how to say it any clearer than that.
You could just say, it's a patriarchal conspiracy. It is a fact.
If you doubt that claim, the major sources I've used to write this video are linked in the description box. Check them out.
Oh yeah, of course. Those sources that contradict you so much and make you a laughingstock so hard, you had to delete one of them. Well played, Steve, well played. That was actually funny. But thing is, you're trying to say that people deny it. Thing is, you're the one saying there is a wage gap and not actually proving it with any real gusto and statistics. Because these statistics are just contradicting you. Because anyone with a logical brain will realise with only the cursory glance of Google that it is multiple reasons why women earn less than men. And it is not because of some patriarchal conspiracy that you've been trying to tell us all the way through this video, but because of making families, taking breaks, picking different jobs and degrees. It's all down to personal choice. And when they do not make these choices, they earn the same, if not more so, than men. So what's it going to be, Steve? Are we going to debate why there is an earnings gap? Or are we just going to debate if there actually is one? Because that's not the reason why you made this video, Steve.
Or better yet, do your own research. You'll find, as I did, that the wage gap exists for virtually all women, all around the world. Though it varies in size, it exists for women of all ages, of all races, in virtually all occupations. It exists for married women and single women. It exists for women without children and women with children.
But it doesn't, Steve, because I've researched it and come to the complete opposite conclusion of you, as have loads of other economists and businessmen and feminists and MRAs, etc. Pretty much everyone who has made a complete and proper research of this topic has come to the conclusion that it doesn't exist. It is an earnings gap, not a wage gap. Women are paid the same in all Western societies because we have laws. If they weren't, we'd be jailing these employers who are discriminating women based on their pay. It's bullshit, Steve. It's bullshit. But you see, I want to know how you researched this, because as far as I'm aware, it seems to me like you were in a feminist echo chamber or a hug box and asked for a couple of reports. You were basically using a cognitive bias in order to come to this conclusion. You said to yourself, there is a wage gap. Now, how do I prove it? And thus, you have proved yourself. You have proven your argument. You just needed the evidence to back it up. But I've got news for you. That's not how you do it. And if you were to do it the proper way, you'd find it's bullshit. But you know what? Next, Steve. Let's move on.
I suppose we could argue about what causes it, how much of it is directly attributable to sex discrimination versus other factors. But the thing we cannot do is deny it.
We can, Steve, because people have proven it doesn't exist. It is not a wage gap. It is an earnings gap. And I hate to repeat myself, but I have to until you get it into that bald head of yours. Yes, Steve, we know your secret.
And the thing we must not do is ignore it. The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.
Steve, nobody is ignoring it, but the sad fact of the matter is, women's personal choices are going to make it last for quite some time, until they start taking less breaks, until they start working the same amount of hours as men, until they start taking the same amount of jobs as until they start taking the same jobs as men that are higher paid and have the same higher degrees and graduate degrees, and until they stop having kids, because there's 7 billion people. I think we can handle a few years without kids. Then the earnings gap, not the wage gap, will disappear before you know it. This has been Charming Man 93, people. Like and share the video, subscribe to my channel, and until next time, I'll see you later, Steve, for round 3.